Welcome. Today, I have a pretty amazing individual with us. He spent some time as a designer a long time ago, but I don't think he does any more design these days unless absolutely forced to, but has some amazing skill sets. He's a amazing podcast host, and you will know his podcast when I mention it. It is the Solopreneur Hour, and you can find out more about that at solohour.com. He also teaches people how to do interviews, how to launch podcasts. He's launched many amazing podcasts and helped hundreds of other or thousands of other people launch podcasts. He's an MC, and I've seen him MC some amazing events and does an excellent job of that, and a paid speaker, and I've seen him do some excellent talks at some of the events I've been to. And a personal friend. So Michael O'Neill, welcome. Really stoked to have you here and get to interview you. This is actually not our first interview. I interviewed you I think a year or two ago, and then you actually interviewed me the other day. So stoked to have you here. Welcome.
It is an honor. Thanks, man. I love, it's fun to cross paths with people years later and see because we're all excited when we get on shows. We're like, oh, we're going to do this and this and this. And then you get to see a couple of years from now what happened. Literally right before we did this interview, I just interviewed this amazing artist called Sean Dietrich. And when we last spoke was like episode 129, and I'm now on episode 693.
Wow.
So it was like 3 years ago, and he was just starting this new thing. And now that he's in here, not only was that thing hugely successful, but he's on the cusp of this next huge thing. And it's cool that we have these timestamps in podcasts that we get to kind of talk to people and see the progress. So thanks for having me, man.
Hey, no worries. No kidding. And it's funny because that was one of the early interviews I was doing for our YouTube channel. And you kind of gave me a bit of an education. So for those of you who don't know, Michael teaches people how to do interviews and podcasts, and actually has at artoftheinterview.co, if you're interested, can teach you about better conversations and better interview skills, which I think even applies to online course creators, definitely. But I hopped on this chat with you, and I remember partway through you were really... I took it kind of as an education around how to introduce a guest.
Yes.
And it was sort of playing off of like being on you see a talk show like Stephen Colbert or something, and they don't just say, here's my guest, Michael O'Neill, and then talk about you. It's sort of, you tell the whole story and you tease it up and you get people a bit excited, and then you say, drop the name.
Well, you want to see something? So you guys hang on 1 second. Watch this. Wait for it. It's important.
We're waiting. And if you don't notice there, Michael's got a pretty cool swag. That's the unemployable t-shirt.
I just saved this the other day because I saw Jimmy Fallon do this. He had Jerry Seinfeld, and he had what's his butt? Well, you'll see because I have it right here. So check it out. And this was a perfect example, and I can only do this because it's video, and I rarely do these video interviews, but this one, it was going to work out really great. So hooray for video interviews. So I saw this the other day. This is Jimmy Fallon, and I'll do this. Check this out. This is what a pro does. This is how a pro brings somebody on. Ready?
Comedians. First, he created and starred in one of the greatest sketch comedy shows of all time. He has 2 new stand-up specials premiering on Netflix this spring. Please welcome Dave Chappelle.
Now, and what you just said is what we talked about, right? Which is the 2 most important words to any intro.
Yeah.
Which are, do you remember what those 2 words were?
Oh.
Am I putting you on the spot?
Is it their first and last name that you said?
That's correct. Yes, it is. You got it right. It's their name.
Yeah.
And you never utter their name before the last 2 words of the intro. And what Jimmy just did there, which was so brilliant, is not only did he edify, right?
Yeah.
So he's like, he had the #1 sketch comedy show of all time, blah, blah, but he actually managed to get the plug in before he even introduced him. Because he said this, our next guest had one of the best, and his new Netflix specials are coming out, blank, blank, blank. Ladies and gentlemen, Dave Chappelle. That is a brilliant pro intro. And it does so much for you as the guest. Like, your intro was great today. There's so many things.
Could have been better.
Excuse me. There's so many things now that I don't feel like I have to, how to frame it, like almost brag about myself.
Yeah.
Because you already covered it. It's like you've already been there and done that. And I've actually used my episode with you just in the last week
Yeah.
as an example, because I already saw when you were interviewed on a number of podcasts, okay, he was a lawyer, then he did a PSAT course, he took the earnings from that, started Thinkific, and blah, blah. So instead of literally, if you look up your name, if you Google your name, 20 podcasts with that exact story pop up.
Right.
So I'm like, all right, I'm going to take that out. You don't get
Right.
to talk about that because I'm going to do it in the intro.
Right.
So you're going to be forced to talk about something original and, you know, new, which, by the way, is probably a huge relief for you because you're probably like, dudes, it's on my about page. So like this story's out there already. You're not getting any sort of exclusive content with this. So we might as well just summarize the thing that people already know me for and move on to new stuff, which is what a great intro does.
Yeah, and to be honest, you're right. It's totally refreshing to talk about new things. It felt more, and when you tell the same story over and over, it does start to feel a little bit rehearsed. And so it was great because it kind of felt like we were just having coffee as friends. And then naturally, towards the second half, the more business talk came out. But at the first, I mean, we were talking about kiteboarding and hobbies and that kind of stuff, which is great.
Yeah, that's all on purpose too. So one of the things I like to do is I like to open up every show with what I call it. It's not that I call it, but it's called a non sequitur. So I want to just talk about something that has nothing to do with what they do for a living.
Right.
But the idea is, can I get them started talking in stories? Can people start with something they already know and they're comfortable with and they rarely ever get to talk about? So if I can key in, excuse me, to one of their biggest passions and they just start talking about it, it's a blast. You know what I mean? Like we could start talking about vintage Porsches and your whole show would be about vintage Porsches or speaker stuff. Like if you could see the nonsense.
You're into I think you've got the watches, the cars, and the audiophile interest, right?
Speakers and cars and and the cars out there. Let's see. The cars out there getting ready for a big show that's coming up. And I love having a camera. I'm not used to this.
Yeah.
I'm going to a big show this weekend in LA. And so I had to pull it out of the garage and see if it worked.
Awesome.
And it didn't break down in the middle of the street. So I drove it to my doctor's appointment today. It was great.
Nice.
Anyway, so that's the deal. And I apologize, by the way, in advance because I had bronchitis a couple weeks ago. For whatever reason, in the last 2 hours, the cough has been flaring up so hard. So I will try to I got my mouse on the mute button, but I might not make it every time. So I apologize.
I'm the same. Mine hasn't been flaring up. Mine's been going for 6 weeks now. So hopefully you don't have what I got. I hope you didn't catch it from our last interview.
Probably. Thank you. Thank you very much. I've had it for like a month now. So it's a thing. Anyway, it's your show. I'll shut up now.
No, it's you're the guest. So people want to hear from you. So I feel like we should talk about something non sequitur and hobby-ish and then dive into stuff like courses. Cause I know you have a couple of courses and membership programs and coaching out there, which I know our audience is interested in. But on the fun side, is there new stuff you're up to these days or
Yeah, I mean, when I started I started my, the mothership, it's the Solopreneur Hour. And that was like, I just wanted to have cool conversations with people for an hour. And the intention very much so is to make it feel like we're just hanging out, having a cup of coffee and somebody's, I've left a chair open for them. That's kind of how I like to think about it. I started this show, Beginner Audiophile, about a year ago now. And it was 100% purely so the brown Santa, otherwise known as the UPS guy here in America, would bring me gear that I would just be able to open my door up and there'd be a cool box and there would be some new speakers that I get to play with for free for a couple of months and then send them back. So that was the idea. And then it turned into a whole thing. Like it turned into like a real gig where people are now paying for advertising and it's going to be this crazy podcast because I didn't mean it. I swear.
The funny thing is when I first interviewed you and we didn't really know each other then, you were talking about just starting this as a passion project and no idea where it was going to go. And you'd only done like a couple episodes and it seemed like it was going well and interesting, but it was just, hey, this is a fun passion project.
Purely. And I had zero thought of monetization or where it could go. And now and this is no joke, I'm working on a multi-million-dollar exit strategy from this show. From the
audiophile one.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, a legit multi-million-dollar exit strategy from that show, which is bonkers to even say out loud. But But to answer your question, I've been immersed in that world now for a couple of years. And I've been going to all the different audio shows, and you go to a hotel and they've emptied out a bunch of the suites, and you go to they become the listening rooms. And so I've listened to a lot of stuff, and it's great. And then 3 days ago, the speakers arrived on my doorstep, and they have annihilated every other speaker that I've ever heard in my own house. And really, you'd have to spend a lot more money to get what these things will do. And they're tiny. They're called the KEF LS50.
KEF LS50. Yeah.
KEF is KEF LS50. You guys should look them up.
Yeah.
They're the LS50 wireless, or they're the amplified versions. And so what they did is these guys made the speaker a few years ago that won every award that they had. It was just they are staggeringly good in this kind of small package. And they decided. They won every award that you could win an award for. And then they decided to double down on it and said, all right, so the passive versions are great and you can have your own amplifier and hook them up. Or we're going to put an amplifier and a digital to audio converter and a streaming capability right into the speakers now. So now you just buy it and it's just two speakers. There's no other stuff. And they will annihilate everything you've ever heard, probably. They're
wow.
Amazing.
Awesome. And I know coming from you, that means a lot because I know
they're great.
Obsessed with this stuff. So what is, I haven't actually checked out that podcast. So I know solohour.com and you're at Solo Hour and Solopreneur Hour in terms of the podcast, but Beginner Audiophile. Okay.
Yeah, it's called Beginner Audiophile, and it's at beginneraudiophile.com or Beginner Audiophile on the iTunes. Awesome. And it's me and one of my buddies that also nerds out about things like speaker wires and dumb things. And so, by the way, if you're into it, or think about it this way, here's the deal, and then we can get off this stuff. Think about the last time you've listened to an album, and by album I mean even digital or otherwise, top to bottom. LP or vinyl or whatever, or an actual, or a CD or whatever, top to bottom. Like when you've actually sat down and listened to a whole. For most people, it's at least 10 years. It's been so long. And as a guy I'm a professional drummer. I've been playing most of my life since I was a fetus. And I understand the music side of it, the creative side and the work that goes into that. Mm-hmm. So to take all of that effort, and I've been in studios where it's like a knockdown, drag out fight because of a particular sound, like someone buried my snare drum in the mix. I'm like, it's got to be louder. And it turns into this thing, and bands are like, because it's a relationship. Yeah. And then to have people playing all of that blood, sweat, and tears through Spotify on their crappy Bluetooth speaker or their Beats by Dr. Dre or whatever stupid things they are, you go, oh, so it doesn't really matter what it actually sounds like because what comes out on the other end is dog crap. Because no one knows or cares. And so it's crazy to I'm a Tears for Fears fan. I've been a fan of their whole life. I put these speakers in a couple days ago, and I've been just playing these albums that are known to be amazing recordings, like Fleetwood Mac Rumors and Michael Jackson Thriller and Tears for Fears, Songs from the Big Chair. And I heard a song today, I think it was Head Over Heels or something I've literally heard 1,000 times in my life. And on these speakers on my couch, I was like, oh my God, I've never heard that guitar on that right-hand side that I am hearing right now. And so what happens is we're so used to this, like Apple earbuds or Beats or Bose experience with Pandora or Spotify, that when we hear what it sounds like with a high res file on real equipment, you go, oh my God, that is a totally different experience. And I will argue there's a reason why people make poetry because of music. And the reason why music is one of the things that when you think about, you hear a song and you remember exactly where you were, either as a child or the last time you heard that song. That's how important music is. And none of us are listening to it in the way that it was intended. So I'm like, hey, if I can bring that to people and that kind of joy by saying, look, if you got like $2,000, I will change your world. and truly will change your world. I can't tell you the number of times now I've had people at my house till 3 a.m. and we're just hanging out having drinks and drinking wine and listening to music. It's like 1978 again. It's so fun. It's great. So that's the intention of the show is can I bridge the gap between the big box stores, which are kind of the Bose and Beats of the world, and these super snooty stereo shops where you can't even talk to them unless you're spending like 10 grand or 20 grand or 30 grand on your audio gear. So is there something in between where I can be happy and not spend a ton of money? And by the way, my speakers are from Canada.
Awesome. Nice. Okay. I'm definitely going to check them out.
Yeah. Anyway.
So I'm curious. I'm going to roll it into the court from there to courses as a bit of a transition there. But I am curious. So that one thing in the course space that I see a little bit that I even struggle with is this concept of kind of anyone can teach and anyone can just go out and start something and start teaching it. You don't need to really have a lot of expertise versus what level of expertise. Some people say, just go find something you want to teach, read 5 books on it, and you can start teaching. Other people say, go read 50 or go interview 50 people on it, and then you'll know enough to teach on it. Other people say, no, you need to be an expert and already coaching and teaching and speaking. With this Beginner Audiophile, you started this up because it was a passion project, had some knowledge on it. I know, as a passion, it was knowledgeable. Do you think you can do, and you've started multiple courses. So you've got Art of the Interview, you've got Solo Lab, and I think that your first course came from a speaking tour. You were doing a lot of speaking on a subject and then transferred it into a course. Thoughts on that early stage, someone who's getting started in courses, what level of expertise do you think you need? And is there a way that you see that's a way to gain that expertise or know that you've got enough to get out there and start teaching people?
This is kind of a two-parter, I think. Yeah. Number one, my buddy Nick Unsworth said, I think somebody said this to him, which is you don't have to be the best at the world or best in the world at something. You just have to be a little better than the person you're teaching, right? So that's like, okay, that's one side. The other side is, and this is something I think that anybody could do. I am a believer that you have to do something, and I think you have to be in some ways an expert at something. But I think the magic is is pulling back from the activity and going, oh, why did this work? And that's what I did. That's actually what I did with Beginner Audiophile, because if you happen to see me speak at PodFest in Orlando or Social Media Marketing World in San Diego over the last couple months, I actually changed what my keynote was going to be because of what happened because of at Beginner Audio or from Beginner Audiophile at a conference called CES, which is the Consumer Electronics Show, because I started this thing as a hobby, and then fast forward 8 or 9 months, I'm at this trade show, and I'm targeting this literally towards people like you, that if you didn't know a lot about this world and you were like, hey, what do I need to buy? I'd be like, KEF LS50 wireless, done. Then you're done. Yeah. But it was for those people. But what was happening at this conference was I was walking around and people that were like these stalwart 25-year industry veterans were walking up going, hey man, really like what you guys are doing with the show. I'm like, the hell's that guy doing listening to the show? That's not for him. And that happened a half a dozen times where these people were like, yeah, you're doing a great job. We really need this in the industry because it's a dying, I'm sitting in these rooms with 75-year-olds.
Right.
And these are the people that are spending $80,000, $100,000 on speakers. And I'm going, you guys aren't even on Instagram. How do you think any new human is going to find your stuff? Because these guys are all going to be gone in 10 or 15 years, if not less, right? So where's your business coming from? And so because we're sort of this new blood and we're doing it in a way that we kind of get social media and we get, podcasting and things like that, I stepped back. After this conference, I was like, how did that happen? How did I just end up getting sponsors for this show that I didn't give a shit about? Like, it was not even, I wasn't even on the radar. And it's because I applied this inadvertently, had applied this template of launching a podcast that I've now done more than half a dozen times. And I thought, oh, I've never talked about that template before. So that's what my talk is going to be, is what have I done now in all of these shows where the brand came first and then finding the audience and then talking about it and planting the seeds and then launching the show and then, being consistent and having good audio, all these things that I've just done because they were in my brain. Yeah. Now I could easily create a course on how to launch a world-class podcast. Because I stepped back from what made this thing successful and said, oh, wait, it's the same thing that made all those other shows successful too.
Right.
I should just talk about that. And I was going to talk about the art of the interview, but that was a third of it. That's a piece of what made it work.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Doing the good interviews, but there's the launch piece even just to get there.
Yeah. You got to have a show that people will care about first. And so I think that a mistake that people make is they'll see something that's like a trend and they'll go, and we've seen this over and over and over. Like, it was like Snapchat. I'm going to be a Snapchat expert and I'm going to do a show on Snapchat. I'm like, Snapchat's been out for a month. How do you know? You know what I mean? How expert are you at this point? Or people that start these, Instagram growth and they have, 1,000 followers on Instagram. Like, how do you do that? How do you just say, now, if you had 1 million, like Nathan Chan from Founder, then you go, all right, how did you do that? Can you work backwards and step through that? But so that, and then the part where I think people are educated in ways that they don't realize that they can scale it. So like I got interviewed by this local TV station and we were talking about becoming a solopreneur, and they were like, they were just doing their thing. And the host said, well, how do you, can anybody be a solopreneur or whatever? And I, in like a minute, I broke down, there's 3 people. There's her, the camera guy, and then a producer on the side. And I showed each one of those how to take the skills that they had in their current job and launch their own business from it. And they were all speechless. Yeah. Because they didn't understand how to extract the skills that they had. So if you're great at Excel spreadsheets, somebody else needs to know how to do that. Or if not, as a job, what if they need like a little $17 course because they're running their kids' softball team and they've got statistics that they have to put in. They don't know how to, add columns or something. Yeah. Would that guy spend $17 on learning a little bit about Excel? Of course he would. Well, gosh, you sell 10 of those a day and all of a sudden you made $170 a day. Yeah. And you get over throughout the month and you go, oh, wait a second. All of a sudden I've got a business now and you just happen to know a lot about Excel. You know what I mean? Yep. So that's to me how you can take the skill set that and I think you should be an expert a little bit. Like it's not like I'm looking at notes right now, but if you had anything to ask me about podcasting or speaking or whatever, if you took me to Thinkific Live or whatever, it doesn't exist yet, and you said, hey, can you go do an hour on launching a podcast? I'd be like, great, give me the mic. I'll just go talk about it because I know it inside and out. Right. So I think that helps. Yep. Yeah. And I've struggled with this one a bit in terms of, our marketing, even in terms of what to tell people at that level of expertise needs to be, because there is the concept, and I've actually been coached even in hiring people, not to hire the person you think you need 5 years from now, hire the person you need to do the job just for the next year. And then they can grow after that. But you get someone, 5 years out. So it's all, to some extent, it can be the same with coaches. Is you don't necessarily need like if I go as a CEO and get a coach who's, Richard Branson, who's running this massive empire, the things he does day to day, or even the things he's done for the last 10 years are radically different from what I'm doing right now. So you can, I think, that's an interesting thing where you can be, 5 steps ahead of the person or 10 steps ahead of the person where you can actually be teaching them. And then the other piece I found, like with my LSAT course, is I did really well on the test, but I didn't know why. And I wasn't, initially teaching people, but I was able to make a really good transition into teaching quite quickly by doing exactly what you talked about, is just thinking, why did that work? And once I broke it down, it did take weeks, months to kind of break it down, write out the curriculum, and then go and deliver that to people. But I was able to make a pretty good transition from, this is working for me, maybe I can distill it into a course. Well, it's different too with content creation. So if this isn't coursework necessarily, but if you were, and Beginner Audiophile is my journey. I don't walk on representing myself as the expert in audio. I'm the beginner. So what I've been doing is pairing myself with guys that are much more experienced than I do. So I'm asking the question from my listener's standpoint a lot, and I'm going, that smells like BS to me. I don't know about, elevating my speaker wires from the ground, if that's going to make any difference in sound. By the way, that's a thing. Yeah. That's how much snake oil there is in that world. They charge $1,200 for these little devices that like hold your speaker wires off the ground. I'm like, who are you? Who do you think you are? Anyway, but so I do like the idea of taking somebody along for the journey as a beginner. And I think that's a very viable way to start creating content on Instagram or Facebook or whatever. And I think with that knowledge, then you go and you can take a course. So you could have actually double dipped. You could have been putting content out for, here's how I'm studying for the LSAT and here's what I'm doing. And then once you've taken the course and it was successful, then turn back around and go, here's why it was successful.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
And to be honest, I did start before I even did the course. Well, I was teaching the course live, but then I was also creating content on a blog. So I was doing a bit of a journey through creating content. So actually that's interesting on the content side, leading to a course potentially. I mean, you've launched dozens of successful podcasts and helped other people do that, and actually can coach people to do that. Do you think, everything I've seen on stats on podcasts lately is that the advertising of podcast industry is killing it. It's a great opportunity for advertisers. That the whole podcast industry is just still explosively growing. That people, a year or 2 years ago are saying it's peaked. It's still going. If I'm looking at getting started into a course, do you think a podcast is a good way of building an audience? Because it's great to have an audience, and if you launch a new product tomorrow, you've got an audience right off the bat because you have followings. Like if you launched an audiophile course, or if you launched a how to build a podcast course, like you mentioned, you've got an audience because of your listeners that you can immediately launch that to. Do you think that's a good way of people getting started even today?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, it's funny too, because when you start thinking about, once the show is established and people are listening and things are moving, like I've thought about making my own speaker cables, kind of DIY audiophile speaker cables with a little, Beginner Audiophile branding on them, that, because then, I mean, I could probably make them in my garage in a couple minutes and make 10 sets. And if I'm getting, $50 each for them, they cost me $10. It'd be a fun little side gig, to ship them and do all that kind of thing. And that's how these things usually start. But you have to think of whatever the needs are of the people that are listening. But I'll tell you, I didn't have a presence at all. At all. At this time last year, if I walked into an audio show with all my Beginner Audiophile stuff, nobody knew anything about anything.
Right.
It didn't really exist. It wasn't until like October when I walked into a show in Denver, and I remember I was registering, and I remember I went down to the media thing, and I said Michael O'Neill, and the guy goes, "Oh, Beginner Audiophile." I was like, "Huh, yeah, cool, yeah, right on." And then later that day, and this is crazy, as a podcaster, you'll find this kind of interesting, I think. I was imagine being in like a floor of a hotel, and you see all the doors, and you're down the big long hall. One of the doors was open. I was in one of the rooms talking to a guy, and this dude pokes his head around the corner. He goes, "Michael O'Neill, right?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Yeah, I recognize your voice from down the hall." I was like, "What? That's never happened to me. That's crazy." Wow. So, awesome. And the doors that open because of it. Like I've thought about all kinds of different ways, if I wanted to monetize this show, including weekend workshops where people come in and we show them how to set up all their gear and kind of do like listening, here's how it sounds this way, here's how it sounds this way, here's how it sounds, moving left and right and that kind of thing. And all kinds of different ways that literally didn't exist 1 year ago. So I have all kinds of options because I now have a brand presence in this industry that was zero a year ago. So I still think it's a really viable way. Having a trend is great. My friend Joel Comm, started the Bad Crypto podcast in June, and I think they've gotten like 4.5 million downloads already.
Wow.
Because crypto is the hot ticket. So it matters. I would say the single most important thing you can do in your solopreneur career, your podcast career, in your course career is nail your brand. People have to nail. You can't miss on the brand. The brand part is so when you say
nail your brand, you mean like, is that the name? Is that the logo? Is it the look and feel? Or is it the whole passion behind it?
It's all of it. That's what I mean. It's a brand. There's a million ways to define what a brand is. Some people say it's what people say about you when you're not in the room. It's true. I mean, that's legit.
It's the elevator pitch that you don't give, that someone else gives.
Somebody else. Right. And so, one of the ways, at least in the podcast world, is I want everybody I want everybody within a quick glance of my podcast artwork to know exactly what they're getting.
Right.
Like this tells the tale.
Right.
Beginner Audiophile, it's got the podcast artwork is a variant of this where the record's really big and it just has Beginner Audiophile. And that's it. There's nothing else on it. But it laser targets the audience that I want to listen to this thing.
Yep.
And that is what makes it super successful, because you mentioned something about advertising.
Yeah.
And this just requires a little bit of smarts around it. When I go to these audio shows, there are, let's say there's 100 different manufacturers that come in from all over the world.
Right.
And they'll fly 3 people in from England, all their gear. They have to get hotel rooms. They have to get their gear shipped there. They have to get food and all that stuff. They have to rent the suite. It's a $25,000 weekend for this company that, this is an industry that thrives on the masses. They'll get maybe 600 people in for the weekend through their room to sit down and listen, and they're doing the little demos and that kind of thing. And I'm like, wait a second. My show now is getting, that's not a huge number, but between 3,000 and 4,000 downloads per episode of laser targeted listener.
Yeah.
So I can walk into those guys and go, hey, what's your lifetime customer value? And they go, oh, well, it's like $1,400. And that means that they'll buy let's say a $300 piece of gear this year, but then next year they might spend another $400. And the next year they might spend $600 or whatever. And over the course of that person's entire, lifetime, they'll spend $1,400.
Right.
But to me, I go, oh, that just means that if I charge them $3,000 a month for advertising on my 2 shows, 2 humans out of 8,000 need to buy a piece of gear until they break even.
Right.
That is really easy sell.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So if I compare it to what they spend in the real world, I go, dude, this is crazy. Like I have this Marantz receiver. I've had 6 of them. So there's brand loyalty up the wazoo in this industry. So you buy one thing and you can count on thousands of dollars coming down the road. That is a pitifully easy sale compared to what I have to do on the Solopreneur Hour, which is kind of much broader. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like some people have dogs. So do I try to sell this dog thing, or do I, you know what I mean? Like,
but is the solopreneur thing, like, is it less targeted? Like
for sure. Well, think about as an entrepreneur, all the things that you might use. It
some
could
of
be
them
accounting.
are into courses, some of them are into podcasts, some of them are into, maybe a brick and mortar solo. I guess you're right. There is quite
lifestyle design stuff. They could just want something for their kid, or they want to eat better. So you might want the prepackaged meals. There's a million different ways, and you have no idea which one thing is going to really take.
Right.
So
if you're doing a new course or a new podcast, do you highly suggest, or would you personally always go laser focused now? Because with Solopreneur, you probably have a bigger audience, but less targeted. So
that's right.
If you're launching something new, what are you going after? If I'm or one of the people listening is going to go and saying, you know what, I want to launch a new course, and I'm going to start with a podcast to help build the audience and market the course. Should I go laser targeted or broaden it up and get more people in the funnel?
So first of all, that is the exact methodology that I would suggest, which is start a podcast. And then down the road, let your audience tell you they're ready. That's the part that I think a lot of people make a mistake with. They're like, launch a podcast in February, course is coming out in March. You're like, okay, cool your jets. You may not have 9 people listening to your show yet in that 1 month, So let them tell you, which is what I did when I started Solo Lab. I think I had 39 people email me and say, hey, do you teach this stuff? And I was like, no. And then the 40th, I was like, yeah, of course I do. What are you talking about? Of course. Yeah. And so.
And then you pre-launched that one too, didn't you? You opened it up without building it and said, you know what, if a bunch of people will sign up, then I'll go build it.
Yeah. Which is how you do it. I mean, that's really that's how you won't waste your own time. It's how, people, first of all, people vote with their wallet.
Yeah.
So they'll tell you all day long, they're like, oh yeah, you should totally do this. Okay. And then it becomes launch day and, 9 people out of 50 will buy. And you go, okay, is it worth it for the 9? Who knows? But I would highly suggest you start targeted. And then if you want to back out, like if you were going to say, I want to start a show and do these interviews with entrepreneurs, I'd be like, that is the worst podcast idea I can imagine in 2018. Seriously. It's just, it's the traction of that show
Yeah.
is so minimal at this point. So I got lucky with this.
Yeah.
But I also have another, if someone said you have to launch another show right now,
Mhm.
I would do it around the vintage Porsche world. Because I know, again,
Right.
I know a lot about that world. I know all the players involved. I built my own car from scratch. I know all the stuff. And so I would do one of those, and it would also probably be very successful.
Right, because it's super targeted, and then you have
I
a
know
great
all the
audience.
manufacturers, and I know where here's the thing you got to know for all of this stuff. First of all, you got to know whatever your topic is. Second of all, and critically, you have to know where the audience is hanging out.
Right.
You have to. So with BA, I knew I didn't want to muck with Facebook. I didn't want to do much, I know they're on forums, but that's the old guard. I'm like, I want to go on Instagram. Instagram is a perfect spot because audio gear is gorgeous industrial design. If these are artists that are making, furniture, and it represents well with photos. So people really dig that. If I showed you these Biodynamic Aventho wireless, which I happen to have handy, they're beautiful. Like they're these really killer German, super soft leather. They kind of look like this kind of looks like a hose clamp, which I think is cool. They fold totally flat if you need them to travel. They're just really beautiful headphones, and they represent well in pictures. So I can say, hey, I'm reviewing these things and take this beautiful picture. And so not only do people on the Instagram account like it, but Biodynamic now knows who I am. And when I go to the show, they're like, hey, man, really love that Instagram picture. It's like, cool. Here, please try out our $3,000, whatever they are. So I think you need to know where the audience is. It's one of the hardest things of all of this. But if you're
that translates great to courses, right? Because if you're targeting that younger audience on Instagram, or if you're targeting people getting engaged, then you go straight to, I think, Facebook, because you can target well there based on engagement status, things like that.
Yeah. But I just had somebody was talking about a fitness in Solo Lab last night. They're talking about a fitness thing. And I was like, well, they're all on Instagram. All the fitness industries, Instagram. But if they said, it's about recruitment or a dentist or, whatever, LinkedIn, you better be on LinkedIn, and you better really understand LinkedIn. If they're doing something for programmers or something really pop culture, I'm like, you better become a Reddit expert, because that's where they all are. Seriously. Like, you just have to know where your audience is hanging out. And in a perfect world, you are the audience, so you're already hanging out there.
Right. Yeah.
Ideally.
Excellent.
Whether it's a course or a podcast. I mean, I really feel like they go hand in hand. Yeah. You've got two options, right? Well, three, I would say. You can either start a podcast and launch a course. You can start a YouTube channel, then launch a course. Or you can spend a bunch of money on Facebook ads running to your course. Like, if you don't have an audience already. So if it's organic, it better be a podcast or a YouTube channel. To me, podcasting is a lot less heavy lifting. YouTube channels require cameras and lighting, and I got to put pants on, which is so weird. And and
this is going on YouTube, by the way.
Great.
Yeah.
But a podcast is, you go buy an ATR 2100 microphone and plug it in, and you got a show.
Right. Yeah.
After you've taken the art of the interview, of course. On Thinkific.
Yeah. It is. Yeah, that's great. So
as is Conference-topia.
Right. Oh yes. Conference-topia. That was the first one we talked about. I'm going to link to the other video from way back too, from this, where we talk more about Conference-topia.
Yeah. That one's free.
Right. Yes.
Free 99, as we used to say.
So those are the two good content plays for building an audience. Just curious what you think about how that compares to, say, borrowing an audience, like reaching out to an influencer and saying, can I do some either affiliate marketing or I think your audience would be interested in this. Would you be willing to share it? I'm sure you get people asking you to do this as a starting point, because for me to build a YouTube following or the podcast, it's definitely going to take time. What do you think about that trade-off of the influencer or borrowed audience approach to start with?
I've literally just this last week done that with the art of the interview with 3 separate entities. So I think it's a good idea. We haven't done it yet, but my hope is that it will be very effective. Yeah. I mean, what I do is I will, I'll send the course to the influencer and say, hey, will you give this thing a look and see what you think? And if you like it, if you think it would be cool for your audience, let's do a little JV kind of deal. So that's kind of what I have out in the world right now. And I'm hoping that will come back and pay some dividends.
Excellent. Yeah. And I've seen it be really good for people who are getting started because they can start to build that audience pretty quickly, leveraging others. It's actually been hugely successful for Thinkific, working with people who can, you kindly share stuff about us all the time, which is great. And that works exactly that way.
Yeah, it's really good. And it's because I have that cool Thinkific charger. My little phone charger. No, but I love it.
You have a phone charger?
Yeah, like the little spare battery deal.
I didn't even know we had those.
On it. Really?
Yeah, that's cool.
I don't know where it went. It's somewhere.
I don't have one.
It doesn't last very long, but it's it's handy, but it's very light.
Your hoodie's been stolen, so like I said, we'll have to send you a new one.
I'm completely out of. I'm just gonna get a Thinkific tattoo, and then they can't steal it from me.
I don't even have one of those.
I know you should.
Awesome. And so artoftheinterview.co, good for people who are. Is that specifically for podcasters? What's the avatar there for people taking that course? I mean, I know how you could apply the art of the interview for courses because you could literally build courses built around interviewing people, but does that work there?
So I was at a happy hour like 3.5 years ago with a friend of mine, and she brought a friend, and we were all hanging out, and my friend went to the restroom and then got into a conversation with somebody when she came out, and I was there with her friend who I didn't know at all. And this was like 1.5 years into being a full-time, professional, air quotes, podcaster. And we're having the most awkward, awful small talk that we all hate. It was just like, well, the weather is meh, it was terrible. And I remember snapping into consciousness going, wait a second, why is this bad? I routinely spend an hour. I can hit record right now and spend an hour with a complete stranger, and it's flowing and interesting and engaging. How am I having this bad of a conversation with this human right now? And so it was so weird. And so I mentally flipped the podcast switch in my head, and I focused on being interested versus interesting, which is, I think, is a major lesson to learn. And all of a sudden, there we were, having this really nice conversation. And I realized that so few people in the world are equipped to have a great conversation. They just don't know the protocol.
Yeah.
But when you can, and you happen to be in the mix of the right people, if you're in a very nice, let's say you end up, and you're in this fancy country club or something like that, or maybe you're just surrounded by these really kind of well-versed, maybe sometimes well-heeled people. They're all very good at conversation. There's not a lot of shy wallflowers up in that world.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, when you can speak like they do and talk like they do and engage like they do, there's a huge level of respect that goes back the other way. So the way I've been marketing the course is great conversations on the microphone, better conversations in the world. So ideally, you guys can all flip the switch, whether you're speaking on a mic and you're on video, doing a Facebook live stream, or you're meeting a complete stranger at a party. If I had to identify what has made most of my career successful, it's the networking I've done at conferences. And all of that is the art of conversation, which is all wrapped into the art of the interview.
Excellent. Awesome. Okay. So, and I'm checking out the testimonials there. You got Michael Stelzner saying great things, Nick Unsworth, Pat Flynn, Joel Comm. So for those of you looking to check it out, artoftheinterview.co. And can we be so bold as to give something special to a few of the viewers here?
Yeah. I think that if we have, what I'll do is, you guys have all the high technology so that I can do a coupon code. And not only can I do a coupon code, but I can limit the amount. So for the first 10 people, if they want it, we'll give them $100 off. The course is, the course is $500, which I think is a bargain. But it's $100 off. And what's I think is cool about it, it's the only one I've ever seen like this. I did 3 separate courses in one, meaning I did a full video version where I'm here and I'm talking about it. Mm-hmm. But I also did a full podcast version of it that's completely separate. Like I recorded each section as its own individual podcasts. So I didn't just extract the audio. Like I literally re-recorded the whole thing.
Wow.
And then I also did a full written version. So for people that love to read and they want the ebook version, sit on the beach, they can read the course. And so that's also a completely separate, that's not a transcription. That's a totally different version of that. And so I wanted all of those things to come in one course. And then the other thing I thought was kind of fun is very few people tell you about what happens when it goes off the rails. And I had this awful interview with a very, very famous author.
Yeah.
And it went from, and since this is visual, this is great. We talked about the non sequitur questions, which I always do at the beginning of every show because I want people to flow and I want people to feel comfortable. And it's rare that you can get people comfortable and starting to share stories until it's like 23 to 25 minutes into the show. So I try to accelerate that by getting them to tell stories. And so this guy's been out in the marketing world for 40 years. And I said, so, you know, you've traveled all over I thought this is a great question, by the way. I said, you've traveled all over the world now. You've been to multiple countries, multiple times. If you had to get on a plane right now and go fly to a country to have the best meal you've ever had, where would you fly? Which I thought was a baller question for something like that they've never been asked before. And I was like, come on, bring it on, baby. You know, because you want like a good few minutes of conversation. We're going to talk about food. It's going to be great. It's going to flow really well. There's a pause. I like my wife's cooking. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah. Okay. But if you had to, where would you, you know, I go, it's a roadblock, wham. And I was like, okay, if you had to.
I think they call that blocking on stage.
Oh, it's like a full, oh, it's terrible. There was no yes and. There was no yes and. It was like wham. And so I said, okay, but all right. I'm sure she's made and cook, but you know, where would you go? And he said, she picks fresh vegetables from the garden. I was like, that defined the interview. So I had a couple questions written down. He was a very influential author in my life. Mm-hmm. And I kid you not, dude, I was like, I started out just like we are now and like really excited about this whole thing. Yeah. Within 3 minutes, I'm standing up and I'm in like a fighting pose. I'm like, all right. So, and I'm like, I'm really literally could have thrown a punch based on how much aggression was coming out from both of us. Yeah. And I should do this because I know you wanted to see the rest of this show.
Oh yeah. I was commenting on it when you walked over to get the get the phone for the video there.
Oh, cool.
So unemployable shirt. Love him.
Dude blocked me with every question, and it became the worst. I don't want to say the worst interview because it was a real. What I did is when I hit stop on that recorder, I remember thinking, "Oh, that he pushed me to the very edge of my talent as a host." Yeah. On that interview, like he stretched me everywhere because he was so difficult. And so what I did in the art of the interview, which I don't think anybody has ever done before, is I took that entire interview we did and I did like this director's cut mystery science
awesome
overdub. So I was like, all right, so here's what I was going for with this question. Then you hear me ask the question, then you hear his response. I go, all right, so once he said this, I had to do this and this and this. And it was, so it's just really this kind of like giving these behind the scenes insights to what you do when you have this difficult interview. And it took me forever to do it. Like it took me 3 days to do this 1 hour interview because of so much back and forth and the recording and the cutting and the editing and all the stuff I had to do to make it work. But I think it's awesome. I think it's an awesome learning tool. Just if it was only that
I really want to go check that out. That's a really cool. I've never heard of anything like that in a course. The sort of breakdown.
Yeah. Well, I'll see if I can get you an account. I'll give you a discount code.
Thanks. Awesome. So for anyone who wants to check it out, artoftheinterview.co, make the coupon code Thinkific.
Yeah, let's do Thinkific. That sounds good.
Cool. With a capital T and everything else lowercase. We'll put a link in here, and then I want sololab.com if you want to check out SoloLab, which is a great place for solopreneurs to hang out. I know actually the way I got introduced to you was a friend of mine who joined SoloLab, and he was so stoked. Oh, you got to talk to this guy.
Who was that? That good of a friend.
Well, I haven't talked to him in a couple of years, in about a year, but he was the guy I think who you looked up the email the other day while we were talking.
Oh, yeah.
I feel terrible.
Now we both forget. That's all right. Sorry.
See this.
Never mind him. Yeah. We'll stick it back in post.
Yeah. Okay. or Solo Hour, or at Solo Hour on all the social channels if you want to check out Michael O'Neal. And
right.
then
I'm creating a coupon right now, by the way. I'm taking 100. And you said we're going to do, it's Thinkific with a capital T.
Sure. Yeah. Thinkific, the normal way you'd spell it, hopefully with a capital T.
Right.
$100 off, and then you make 10 uses. So the first 10 of you want
10
to
uses.
check that out.
That's
but
right.
if you also want to check out Michael's other courses, there's you can start at solohour.com to check everything out, or I Want Solo Lab. If you're interested in Solo Lab for joining a community of other solopreneurs, which I know sometimes it gets lonely. So it's good to have those other coaches around you helping you through things. That was awesome. I actually want to go check out Beginner Audiophile now and the speakers you were talking about.
I'll tell you, they will be, if you do that, they will be, it's a rabbit hole, and they are.
Yeah.
But you want to see them since we're here and we're on video? Hang on.
Yeah.
They're so nice.
Yeah, so that's I've actually got one of those shirts at home, the UMOB shirt, as I call it, because if you read down one side, it says UMOB, and people always walk up to me and say, what does that say? But it's unemployable. Oh, wow. Yeah, those are pretty.
Those little guys.
Wow. It looks like a rocket ship booster, like flames are about to shoot out of it.
Put my ears on so I can hear you. Gotta put my ears on. Say that again.
I was just saying it looks like a rocket ship booster, like flames are about to shoot out of the speaker.
Oh, man, they're so heavy. They're really heavy. But these are the KEF LS50.
Yeah.
Absolutely gorgeous. That's a
nice.
tweeter in the middle of the woofer. So
wow.
that's a tweeter, and then that's the woofer. And then they're very pretty on the back. They've just done this really nice industrial design. So there's an amp back there, and not much. You just power it, and you're off to the races. They have a bunch of different finishes. This is kind of the gloss white with a matte white face. And I can't stress enough how crazy good these things sound. You pair these things with a subwoofer, and you're pretty much done for listening to amazing audio.
Wow.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Well, my dad's pretty into sound too and speakers these days. So maybe that's a good Christmas gift idea for me.
Seriously. I should get commission on those, but I don't yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Make them like an Amazon link or something.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Well, hopefully they're advertising on your show.
Yeah. Oh, trust me. That is going to be, once this review happens, it's a little tough because I've got this, like, it's hard for me to review or use individual products as an advertiser.
Yep.
It's easier when it's like a distribution company, right, like Crutchfield or,
right,
something like that. But
yeah,
money's money. If I believe in it, I believe in it. Anyway, thanks, dude.
Awesome.
Much appreciated.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks, Michael. All right, everyone. So check it out, solohour.com, at Solo Hour on all the social channels, artoftheinterview.co if you want that course, or if you want to check out iwantsololab.com. And I'd say if you're at all interested, even just go check out the sites, take a cruise around. You can even see how he set up his courses because Michael has been in this game for a while and does. And then, of course, check out the podcasts, Solopreneur Hour and Beginner Audiophile if you're interested in the audio side of things.
Subscribe to all of them.
Yeah, everything.
We've given you a lot to do.
Yeah.
All of a sudden. Cool. Thanks, buddy.
Awesome. Thanks a lot.